Good morning, HBCU participants and colleagues, and welcome to DOI session on how the HBCU community can make an even more impactful and positive difference, and the importance of preserving our natural and cultural resources. My name is Kim Oliver, and I am the department's Principal Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Strategist. And I'm joined here today by three of my colleagues. And so we will do a round robin of introductions. Each participant will please share a little bit about your background, your career journey into the department, and your current role with the department. So we'll begin with Holly. Holly, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning as well. My name is Holly Waddell, and I've been with the Department of Interior Bureau of Land Management for 20 plus years, dedicating that energy to the Wild Horse and Burro program. I began as a student career experience student. It was a program back in I won't tell you the year, but it wasn't that long ago, as a wild horse and burro specialist. And I was able to work hands-on with members in the field as well as leadership on wild horses and burros that live on the range as well as off the range. I've served as the Wild Horse and Burro program budget lead and relocated to Washington, D.C. for a number of years. And then in October of 2014, I assumed a position as the branch chief for the Wild Horse and Burro program off-range operations. Recently, I accepted the position of division chief, and that is my current position. And in both my previous and current positions, I spearheaded initiatives on youth hires, as well as contributing to departmental and bureau policies, strategic workforce planning, recruitment and position classification, and performance management. I've been instrumental in developing partnerships and innovative approaches to private care placement for wild horses and burros. And I have a strong knowledge of the federal budget process and accrual accounting systems, and have been responsible for multi-funded budgets ranging from $40 million to $140 million. I am a graduate of a historically Black college or university. I attended Langston University, which is located in Langston, Oklahoma, and it is the furthest HBCU West. I received degrees in both animal science and biology. And at the time, Langston University had a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Land Management in an effort to diversify its workforce at the time. Based on that MOU, I was chosen as one of those student career experience program students, and had been involved in the program with the privilege of representing BLM at many career fairs, engaging with students in classrooms, and discussing career opportunities on a large group setting. And so I'm super excited to be here today and being able to engage in this discussion and with each of you.
Thank you so much, Holly. We'll move on to Jackie. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kim. And first and foremost, let me say that I am excited to be part of today's panel with some of my experienced colleagues. Very happy to be here. And Kim, thanks for having us today. So I am Jacqueline Jones, but I go by Jackie Jones. I graduated from North Carolina Central University a while ago, I'll just say that, and I'm very active in my alumni community. I graduated with a bachelor's of business administration with a concentration in finance. And for the past 27 plus years, I have been able to work across the federal government. I've worked what I like to call the cabinet level agencies, which are your larger agencies that have huge missions that support domestic as well as overseas operation. And that includes the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security. And in that career, I finally landed at Department of the Interior. I've been here about a little bit over 3 years. Currently, I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Administrative Services. I have a team of about 12, close to 1,300 government employees that's geographically dispersed across the United States in the Office of Policy Management and Budget. I started out in my career as a contracting officer, enjoyed the work, but more importantly, I enjoyed working and supporting and serving the people. And so that's been a theme across my entire career, making sure that I work in large groups, large teams for a common mission and a common goal. And so again, I'm looking forward to today's discussion. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights from my lens, as well as gaining some insight from the lens of my colleagues. And again, I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I did not know that you started off in contracts. Every time I speak with this group, I learn something new about each of them. Okay, George, the floor is yours for your intro. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kim, and good morning to everyone. I'm George McDonald. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised in Harlem, the Harlem community of New York City, ungentrified, by the way, and that goes a few years back. I'm a proud Hampton University pirate, and I probably spent the best 4 years of my life at Hampton, our home by the sea. And my journey into the Department of Interior was an interesting one, because I was actually in the private sector for a number of years, and my brother, who was a historian, recruited me into the National Park Service, which is a bureau within the Department of Interior, and I've been with Interior for the last 22 years. And I can safely say that I'm surprised that I get paid to have so much fun doing what I do. And my career has been varied. I first came in and worked in civil rights issues at the National Park Service, and then became a special assistant to the National Park Service Deputy Director, which allowed me to become the project manager for the National Museum for African American History and Culture Presidential Commission, which was put in place by President Bush to write a report to Congress to get the $500 million that financed the museum that we have on the National Mall today. And during the course of my experiences, I've traveled throughout the country. I think that I visited every state except for 4. I've helped to develop a number of national parks, Tuskegee Airmen, National Historic Site in Alabama. I've played a role in the African Burial Ground in New York City, which is the burial place of over 20,000 Black people that were buried in New York between 1690 and 1780. And most people don't know this, but Wall Street was the second largest market of human beings after Charleston. So there was a huge presence of Black people in New York, but those stories sometimes are suppressed. And kind of what we do in the Department of Interior is that we're in charge of those stories. And my current role now is as the Chief of Youth and Young Adult Programs and the Experience Services Program Division for the National Park Service. So I oversee roughly about $40 to $45 million in projects, both on the natural and the cultural resource side, with a target on providing opportunities for young people and young adults in these areas, so that you can work either on trails or doing highly complex work, such as underwater archaeological projects, studying sunken slave ships in the Caribbean, to doing PhD level work on climate science. But I will say this, there's no better place to work than the Department of Interior when it comes to impact. And I'm very fortunate to work here. And thank you, Kim, for the opportunity to participate on this panel.
Thank you, George, and thank you all for your wonderful introductions of yourself. Again, I'm learning something new about each of you all the time, so this is awesome. So what we'll do from here is that we'll do a round robin Q&A. So I'll ask each of you a question, and we'll give each of you an opportunity to answer the same question as it relates to the Department of the Interior. And the first question that I'd like to throw out to this group is, why should Black Americans seek a career with the Department of the Interior? And I know that that's a loaded question and you'll all have diversity in your answers. So I'll kick things off to George for that first question.
Well, the Department of Interior manages and has oversight over 1/5 of the landmass of the United States of America. So it's one of the most important agencies in the federal government. The Department of Interior is in charge of the conservation management of our country's most important natural and cultural resources. So we not only protect these resources, we're the tree huggers, we're into the environment, but we're also in charge of the extraction of resources. When you think about leases for oil, coal, uranium, those are all controlled through the Department of Interior. We've got a varied mission. So when we talk about the stories of our country, the most important sites that talk about the Black contribution to this country happen to be managed by the National Park Service. You cannot talk about these important stories without bringing into play the Department of Interior. We also oversee things such as the National Landmarks Program, National Register for Historic Places, which is really important when we think about rapid gentrification in many of our urban areas. If we're interested in protecting our legacy and making sure that this legacy can be told and taught to future generations, it's very important that we have a good representation over the agency that manages this. For some of you young folks who like rap music, August 11th was just passed. 49 years ago, there was a man by the name of DJ Kool Herc who put two turntables together and he only wanted to play the best parts of the record. And that was the founding of hip hop. He did that in the South Bronx Community Center. If we want to make sure that those stories and those landmarks are protected, we need to make sure that we have representation in agencies that will be in charge of making sure that these stories are protected. The same goes for social justice issues. When there needs to be an arbiter about, well, what really happened 150 years ago? What were the causes of the Civil War? They can't be left to people just coming up with their opinion or writing something on social media. There's actually an agency that does the research and serves as the judge of what are the facts around this history. This is why it's so important that we have really good representation. And not to mention things such as climate change, which is the single biggest threat to our existence as human beings. The Department of Interior is one of the lead agencies in the fight around climate mitigation and environmental issues. And the fastest growing industry over the next several decades will be in the environment, in climate change, and on green related technology. The richest man in the world, I believe, is worth $200 billion. He's made his fortune behind electric cars. We as Black people represent such a small percentage of the green movement, it's not even funny. And if we want to continue to be a part, be decision makers in where this country goes, we've got to be involved in these areas. And part of that is in the private sector, but a large part of that is in the public sector, which the Department of Interior represents.
Thank you, George. Surely appreciate your response and the details that you provided. Same question for you, Holly. Why should Black Americans seek a career with the Department of the Interior?
So thank you, Kim, for that question. And George, what an amazing response. And just to add a few things to what George stated is that I think the most important reason to seek this employment with the Department of Interior is for diverse perspectives. One, that's very important. There's always room for diverse perspectives, especially when we're talking about communicating our story, right? Being able to contribute to the communications of our story. Also, the other thing I would add that the Department of Interior does, again, piggybacking off of what George said, is it's a science-based department. There's scientific research that happens to provide the information, the intel, when we're discussing our history and facts within this nation. That's very important. The last thing that I would add on to is when we're talking about Blacks being involved in natural resources and cultural resources, that is something that is a little foreign to us. The majority of the population of African Americans resides in the South and in larger cities. And so we're not in Western, more rural areas. And so some of these are information and experiences that we don't have. But there are opportunities, right, to learn, and these public lands belong to you as well, even though they're not in your backyard. So, so I would encourage you as students to seek out the information to see where you may have a good fit within the Department of Interior. Because I believe you me, if this little Black girl from a very urban city who wears her hair very natural can be in a wild horse and burro program. And in case you didn't hear me right, that's the wild horse and burro program. Yes. I was learning how to rope horses. I learned how to back up trucks and hook a trailer, drive the trailer, as well as ride some of the horses and interact in a way that I didn't see my animal science and biology education working for me. But it has into a place where I started right from cleaning out trailers up into a place where I'm writing policy and managing budgets. So please take a look at an opportunity with the Department of Interior. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you so much, Holly. That was a great response. Okay, Jackie, same question for you. Why should Black Americans seek a career with the Department of the Interior? Oh, Jackie, you're on mute.
I'd like to answer this question. I appreciate the opportunity. My colleagues, Holly and George, have given phenomenal responses, and so I won't belabor my response to this particular question. So the vast experience, the diversity, very serious about the diversity, all of the things they talk about, the different programs, the cultural background, understanding the history, environmental justice, having clean water, things of that nature. Someone has to be able to come and bring something to the table to get all of this phenomenal work done that we're doing at the Department of the Interior. I want to share a very quick status that I've gotten from the Office of Personnel Management and the importance of raising up a new generation of diverse leaders in the African American community. So as it stands right now, there are about 4 million plus government workers, and of that percentage, less than 7% are under the age of 30, or they're 30 and under. So where are we going to be able to take the mission of great organizations such as DOI if we don't have this young, fresh talent to come in, to push us, to tell us what innovative, creative ideas that are out there? We're doing okay, but we're not exposed to all of those amenities that you all have. And so we welcome your brain trust to work with us to get things done. From being a scientist to doing appraisals, environmental jobs. You have that, you have your traditional business job. There has to be someone that has a business like mine to come in and figure out policies, procedures, hiring, the money. How do we want to spend the money? So I would say many opportunities are here with the Department of the Interior. We're here to express the importance of a partnership with our HBCU community and how we would love to have the HBCU employees, not employees, but the graduates be part of our organization. As you can tell, you have 3 right in front of you, and we've had a long stint with the federal government, and we're not lazy, we're innovative, we're here to do the job, but we also serve as mentors for those that want to come behind us to let them know the wonderful work that they do is important across government, but as well as, raising them up. We want someone to be able to fill our shoes that look like us, to be perfectly honest, in the future. So we would just say we welcome you to have an opportunity to speak with us, to ask your questions, but also know that there are opportunities that are here with the Department of the Interior that will help bring our mission to fruition. And so I would leave with that, and looking forward to hearing what the audience will have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Appreciate your response. We'll move on to our next question, which is, how does the Department of the Interior directly impact the lives of everyday Black Americans and their communities? And we'll kick that one over to you, George.
Well, we do that in a number of ways. When we think about the management of open green space is really key to a healthy physical being and mental being. And there's not enough Black folks in the open green space industry and work, both on the private and the public sector. When you think about green space and park lands, if you've got real estate near those park lands, your house is worth more than if it's not. That's very important because probably the single greatest generator of wealth in the Black community is the ownership of homes. And that's how we pass down generational wealth. I would also say that as we tell the stories of our struggle in this country, it is so important for us to understand these stories and for the stories to be told and interpreted properly. So let's talk about when the first Black people, enslaved Black people, they did not come here as voluntary immigrants in 1619 to the North American English colonies in 1619 when they landed in Hampton. Someone has got to tell that story. And we've got to let people know the importance of that story, because what happened in 1619 is still impacting, it's impacting who we are, what we do, and how we live today. We also need to also make sure that no one can say that we haven't been involved in the development and the protection of these most important natural resources. Some of the most important parks in the National Park Service, Yosemite, the great sequoias, those parks were managed by the Buffalo Soldiers during the 19th century. The first Black superintendent of a national park was Charles Young, who was the superintendent of the great sequoias, where you have those giant trees that have been protected that almost burnt down in the wildfires just a few months ago. We were protecting that back in the 1890s and the early 1900s. The Department of Interior was the agency that gave the form for Marian Anderson to come out and show her talent in 1939 when she was denied the ability to sing at Constitution Hall just for the simple fact that she was Black. By her having that concert in 1939 on National Park Service property, the Lincoln Memorial, that made her an international star. It changed how we view Black opera singers and led to generations of those. This impacts everything. When we talk about green space, when we talk about environmental justice, all the things that we talked about before, there's a lot of management. There are a lot of details that go into that. Almost every portion of your life almost has some bearing on what we do at the Department of Interior, from putting gas in your car to whether or not there's not clouds of bad air over your home or there's clean air over your home, to where you recreate, whether or not you know you're recreating on interior land or not, or you may be on your local municipal and state parks having a good time, but they're being funded through the Department of Interior. So these are just some small examples, but probably the most important is that the Department of Interior also manages the HBCU preservation program, which has saved hundreds of historic structures on our historically Black colleges and campuses for the last 2 decades. That program actually is managed by a former intern of mine who actually went to Hampton University. Go Pirates. But this is really important. So just when it comes to our institutions, we play a major role.
All right. Thank you, George. Appreciate that robust response. So, Holly, same question for you. How does the Department of the Interior directly impact the lives of everyday Black Americans and their communities?
So obviously George gave a great response. So I will be brief in mine. And not much to add, except for a more centralized Oklahoma experience. When I think about what George is stating is really about preservation and understanding that that the Department of Interior plays these impacts because there are public lands and state federal lands as well as state lands that need to be preserved and are available for our use. And I would just add that in Oklahoma, and I know George is familiar with this, 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre was a secret, right? It was a hush hush. It exploded last year in its efforts in celebrating the 100 years. And I don't want to say celebrate, let's say commemorate 100 years of that happening. And the fact that that is the time where the nation became aware of something so violent and so terrible that descended upon the Black community there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the Department of Interior has been working with several historians and a really good friend of mine there in the Tulsa community with looking at how is it that we can better tell this story. And how the Department of Interior can be impactful. National Park Service preserving some of the structures that still exist from those race riots. If you're not familiar with that, it was called the Tulsa Race Massacre, and this was an area that was called Black Wall Street in the 1920s. It was a booming area where Black people, there were doctors and lawyers and cleaners and restaurants and basically community much like the ones that you see now, only it was just everybody was Black. Teachers, lawmakers, all of these people were Black people, and they were descended upon with some evil and hatred. But that's something that I think the Department of Interior could be impactful in the lives of new Tulsa people, and then also respecting some of there are a few survivors that are still alive, but then coming in and being able to communicate that story as well. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Holly, for sharing that. And you're right. I don't recall ever in a classroom while I was growing up, even into college, hearing the story about the Tulsa Massacre. And so uplifting these stories is so important. And who better than us to tell our own story? So, same question for you, Jackie. How does the department directly impact the lives of everyday Black Americans and their communities?
So one thing I'm going to say, Kim, because my two colleagues just packaged that so nicely, is I'm going to go from a level of the president's management agenda, where the Biden and Harris administration have issued a series of executive orders focused on the Black community, which I'm in charge of one, but there are many. And we have what's called a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Council, the first ever at the Department of Interior. And I proudly serve on that, and where we are all charged at levels in the department of making sure that DOI is not just adhering to the different executive orders, but able to produce information, produce data, produce success stories, as well as accomplishments. So I would say we are in line with our Secretary, Deb Haaland, as well as the Biden and Harris administration, with those executive orders that focus on African American from an educational, an economic, a financial perspective, and where, again, we hold the charge of making sure that we don't just understand and it's not a checking of the box, but we're doing things such as today's event, shedding light on the great work we do at the Department of the Interior, as well as offering job opportunities, both from a FTE government contracting position, as well as from an FTE government federal position, where we're opening up the doors even the more to bring in a more diverse culture. I will share that, as well as the council. And then not only that, I'm just going to give one quick example. So the cross-pollination is like what I call it. George is working with a particular office in my organization that handles appraisal and evaluation services for federal land. And for full transparency, it's a predominantly white male organization. The director and I sat down. Actually, the director came to me and said, I want to have diversity in my organization. I'm not sure how to get the word out. We got to let people know we have great opportunities, and not just to adhere to the executive order, but to say we are a diverse organization and we take it very seriously. And so that office director, as well as his team, have been coordinating with George for a few months here, and things are on the horizon, and we're going to make something great out of this particular situation. We're going to have a success story here. So in addition to what my colleague Holly and George said, we have some mandates that we're following, and these are not just your staples or check the box. This is about changing the culture and the climate across the African American community as well as within DOI.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that you spoke to accountability because it's so important, and it's not about just checking boxes. It's really about embedding diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and all that we're doing, not only within our workforce, but for the public and the services that we're providing. So I appreciate you bringing in that accountability piece. It's critical. Okay, so moving on to the next question. I know we've talked a lot about external diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We want to shift gears a little bit to talk about internally the impacts on our workforce. And so, Jackie, I'll go to you first. How does underrepresentation of Black Americans at the department adversely impact Black communities?
A few things, Kim, and again, I'll speak briefly to make sure my colleagues have an opportunity to chime in if they wish. When I think about the underrepresentation, because I've seen numbers as it relates to the 58,000+ employees here, and seeing numbers broken out based on race, and so it's a little disheartening. But let me just say, I am hopeful. When you look at kind of just how the department is operating from a diverse perspective, you may lose hope, or you probably feel a sense of like hopeless, like, wow, we can't get anyone in this organization, or there's a slow moving train to get people in the organization of color that can continue to further this mission. Is there not an interest? Are we not modeling that behavior both internally and externally? But I am beyond pleased to say I see the turning of the tides with regards to this being an adversely impactful situation where there is not a lot of African Americans or HBCUs present in the organization. I just mentioned the DEIA Council, but in addition to that, in the executive orders, I've taken on just kind of like a personal mandate, if you will, to make sure that I'm doing my part. And I think it's important for everyone to do their part. Today, tomorrow, and the tomorrows, where we're connecting first with our home HBCUs to let them know what opportunities are out there, so that it can't look that we're not modeling again what it feels like or what it looks like to be African American or Black, if you will, in a Department of Interior or any type of federal organization. I think it's important for us, not only that, to keep ourselves accountable, to find out what it is that these HBCU students, if you will, graduates and alumni are looking for, right? Are they looking for certain opportunities, and how are we communicating those? I probably can count the number of times I've walked into a room where someone may look like me or be able to connect with me. And so I'm taking that on as not just a responsibility from the agency, but I'm taking it personal as an HBCU alum. What am I doing to make this change within the organization as well as outside of the organization? There are a lot of talents and opportunities here at DOI. And for me, it's important to do my part to say, how can I contribute to that? How can I raise the awareness in my own personal as well as professional circles? So that's what I would say, Kim, as far as it being an adverse impact. We know that that's there, but what are we doing to change the lens and change the scope and the narrative of that? And I go back to doing things collectively as an agency, but as an individual, we have a charge to go out and to share the great work that's being done with this agency, and not being afraid to take on people from a mentorship perspective, or even letting them come in and shadow the work that we do on a daily basis. We have to do an extra olive branch reach to let people know that DOI is here, and it's not just, one particular area. It's a gamut of opportunities that are here for the HBCU community.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm so glad you brought up mentorship and sponsorship. So giving great advice is one thing, but also advocating for those individuals is a completely different thing. And we need advocacy. And so I'm glad that we have you on board doing that. I'm glad we have all of you on board doing that. Same question for you, Holly. How does Black underrepresentation at the department adversely impact the Black community?
So I think Jackie really covered it really, really well. The only thing I would add a couple of things. I think she mentioned perspectives, right? Because the diversity provides these other perspectives. And having the Department of Interior having an underrepresentation of Black people means that you don't have those perspectives, meaning you can't develop policy and you can't address the needs.
At the time in New York, this story about 20,000 Black people being buried a few blocks on Wall Street was a hidden story. Most people didn't know about it. But actually, what had occurred almost 10 years prior was that this burial ground, it was a cemetery. And in 1780, a land developer decided to develop a whole city on top of these Black people who were buried. They didn't care that there were 20,000 Black people buried. So this history got buried with them. And the history was uncovered when the Internal Revenue Service decided that they were going to build a 60-story office tower on the cemetery. They had to dig down deep, and they found these bodies. And there was a huge protest. There was an uproar in New York City, especially amongst the Black community. And the federal government went ahead and built that office tower. It's there. And we came in to try to figure out, well, how can we try to right a wrong that's already been done many times over with the disrespect and degradation of these 20,000 Black people? And we as the National Park Service had to come and bring some perspective, had to do public meetings. The problem, and the reason why I was brought into this, was because the whole team was white. And they were some really smart people, but they had some trouble going into Harlem. They had some trouble going into Bedford-Stuyvesant in these really tough meetings. I had some problems going into those meetings too, because I was representing the government on a very tough issue. But at the very least, I grew up in these communities. I could go in and I knew some of the people getting up to the microphone expressing their displeasure with the government. And with myself and a colleague of mine, we were able to get some resolution where now we've got a great national park site in Lower Manhattan talking about an untold story. The same goes for some of our more recent sites. We have sites that come into the system because there are people in the community that want those sites to commemorate or tell a special story. But in order for that story to be told correctly, there's got to be someone on the inside that's making sure that we're holding the government accountable, we have a good balanced message, and the stories are being told the right way. And that's the importance of diversity. That's a good business case. And that's really important. And we need more young people going into this field. You can actually earn a living being a history major, being an English major, being a philosophy major, being a psychology major, being a liberal arts major in the National Park Service, because we need a lot of those thinking skills. We need people to be able to interpret stories, but also people to be able to analyze really tough issues that impact communities across this country and reach equitable solutions. So when we don't have enough of Black people in those rooms, the Black community suffers because our voices are not being heard properly.
Thank you, George. You are so on point. I take a deep breath behind that one. Thank you. So that leads me to our last question for today. And I first want to just say that one of the reasons that I admire and respect all of you as leaders within the department is that I have witnessed with my own two eyes and my own two ears, you all be allies and advocates for students and youth, especially those attending HBCUs. And so my last question for you today is, I'd like for you to share what opportunities are available to HBCU institutions and students at the department. I'll kick that one over to Holly to start us off.
Okay, and thanks again, Kim. As I said earlier, I think there are plenty of opportunities. The Department of Interior, and more specifically, the agency that I work for, Jackie spoke to some executive orders that that were geared towards African Americans earlier in this conversation. And based on those executive orders and the shift in being more inclusive and willing to diversify the workforce, I believe that they are actively working on ways to diversify the leadership, right? Because that's really important. It's important for us to have people that look like us in leadership positions, and then also across into the field, creating some opportunities for entry-level positions as well in the Black community. There are several recruitment and retention efforts that are under development. I'm looking forward to them. We've heard about some of them. We've heard about the increasing in our human resources staff in order to have positions in those fields to assist in the recruitment and efforts. And I think within, for more specifically, and I know Georgia's been really highlighting Hampton, Langston University, go Lions. I am looking forward to continuing to build a relationship with Langston University and their departments and start talking about what kind of curriculum is required and degreed positions or degrees that would align with the Department of Interior and BLM's positions that are available. And what does that look like? Kim, you had these very cool cards once upon a time that talked about the majors that would be required in order to fill positions within the Department of Interior. And so send me several sets for sure, because those are things that I'd like to be able to take to Langston University career fairs and share with deans of those colleges and even the president at Langston University to state that there's an opportunity for Black students from Langston University here at the Department of Interior.
Thank you, Holly. And I will make sure that I send you those cards. Those cards highlighted the positive education requirements for several mission critical occupations at the department. I think understanding what courses you will have to take in order to qualify for the career that you're interested in is one of many tools that the department is able to provide, not only during HBCU week, but whenever we're out recruiting. So thank you for that reminder. Okay, Jackie, same question for you. What opportunities are available to HBCU institutions and students in the Department of the Interior?
Thanks, Kim. And before I give my holistic answer, I would like to set up those cards too. I'm all about educating myself, those who I come in contact with, and that will help me as well as I'm doing my spiel, if you will, saying, hey, please come work for us. I've mentioned those executive orders, but there's always what I love are the career ladder positions, right? We have opportunities across the business land, across the scientific land, across the research land, when you come in at one grade level and you'll have exceptional opportunities to be promoted. And I speak that into existence because I know, creme de la creme comes from HBCUs. And so I would say those career ladder promotion positions where you go from a GS 7 or 9 and you ended up what I call the journeyman level, where you're promoted at the 12 or 13 level. There's a slew of those that are available in the areas of finance, human resources, IT, a lot of grant making community. I want to add one thing about the grants and some of the programs that they're doing, which is phenomenal. In the Interior Business Center, there are these orphan wells that have not been used in a long, very, very long time. And This organization is awarding grants to the sum total of about $2 billion to 24 states throughout these United States. And the awarding of the grants not only help gets those wells in an operable position, but also it provides jobs and opportunities. So when I talk about federal government and contracting, you can have your pick of the litter. So I bring that to you all's attention. Definitely when you're working for DOI as a government worker or contractor, you're still DOI family here. So I would say those career promotions that are out there, if you have never ever, or maybe one time looked at the DOI website, learn more about our organizations and those wonderful opportunities that are out there. We have internships. In my organization, we probably have about 10 to 12 interns. Some are paid, truth to power, some may not be paid depending on the length of it, but that brings you into our home so you can see how we operate, right? Outside of home, everything is, of course, peachy. You get an inside view of the home and what do we do and how do we work problems and come up with solutions that's going to not just help the organization, but also that's going to help our community. And I mentioned the shadowing before. I've had some people take me up on that were very, very young in their HBCU career. I've always had an open door. That's important because we're saying a lot of wonderful things, but nothing's like experiencing it firsthand where you get to come on board and see kind of what happens and how things work, in particular with the Department of Interior, which is a great organization. So I would say we have career ladder positions from entry level to your senior executive positions. We also have internship opportunities, and one young lady in one of the offices that deals with alternate dispute resolution, she's in law school. She wanted to have an opportunity. We brought her in, a wealth of experience, and I honestly think working in the alternate dispute resolution office for a total of about 4 or 5 months, because she's returning to school, it allowed her to see kind of what is done, and she's actually thinking about changing the area of law that she wants to study. And again, that's a small example, but we have opportunities alike, as well as some that are even more large, more massive. And the other thing I will say is, yes, we support the Department of the Interior, but we also cross-pollinate with other agencies and federal government. So not only would you just get a DOI view, but you would also be in a position where you would see a holistic view when all these acronyms are coming at you. Okay, this is the Office of Personnel Management. You think of people. So we have so many opportunities here. I can go on and on, but I know we only have a certain time limit for today. But I would just say, first and foremost, check us out. We would love to have you all here. We know you bring so much. You are our next generation. We want to pour into you immensely and get you prepared. And this is a wonderful place to work. And as my colleagues have been plugging their schools, you all know the home of the Eagles. So I don't need to go into anything outside of that, but we just know that we are no ordinary barnyard fowl. So I've had a great time today. Kim, I'm going to pass it over to you and look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. We appreciate you. Okay, we're going to round out with George. George, what opportunities are available to HBCU institutions and students in DOI? And I'm so glad we have you on this panel because you are the youth programs coordinator and you have all of the info. So the floor is yours.
So in short, there are tons of internship opportunities that are available throughout the Department of Interior, throughout the various bureaus that comprise the Department of Interior. It's like 11 bureaus that comprise the Interior Department. And I would say that if you're a business major, finance, accounting, we manage billions of dollars in contracts every year. Someone has to manage that process. Accounting, human resource management. We have over 100,000 employees in the Department of Interior. If you're a biology major, you might have wanted to become a doctor, but by the time you get into your junior year of biology, you're like, whoa, maybe I don't want to be a doctor. But you can still use that degree to be a wildlife biologist, getting in the outdoors, managing migration patterns for birds and wildlife and things of this nature. We have a huge law enforcement infrastructure in the National Park Service, in the Department of Interior. I mean, our infrastructure is huge. We have one of the largest federal law enforcement apparatuses in the whole federal government. In some of our parks, we actually have court systems and prisons because they're that big. And there are huge opportunities if you're in law enforcement, you might not want to go into the FBI, you might not want to work in the municipal police department, but working around protecting natural and cultural resources, that is a skill. That is very important. We need lawyers. We need building construction majors, architects. We manage millions of historic structures, new structures throughout the various lands that we manage. And so there are huge opportunities in a wide variety of disciplines. Physical education majors, recreation majors. I mean, we're the largest entity, federal entity that organizes play in the whole country. Public health, because we have millions, tens of millions of people that visit our public lands annually, we have to have public health officials that keep these places safe from infectious diseases, et cetera. Engineering majors. So there's a lot of opportunities for students. There's also a lot of opportunities for the institutions, for our historically Black colleges and universities. I'd like to make a strong pitch to the professors and the administrators at our HBCUs, because there are these opportunities in primary investigation of different problems and issues that come about on these public lands, or when we're doing studies, when we're going to bring in new structures, new things into our system, we typically contract that stuff out. They either go through contracts or we pay for them through cooperative agreements. But we don't have enough HBCUs playing a role in that. It really troubled me when the founder of Black history, Carter G. Woodson, we were doing studies on the development of the Carter G. Woodson National Historic Site here in Washington, D.C. And for some reason, we got a university that was a predominantly white institution, very fine university. I won't name the name, but they got the contract, and then they came in, and in the first meeting, they said, well, we just want to start. We want to thank you for the contract, but we know absolutely nothing about Carter G. Woodson. We had never heard of him until we got the contract. Now, we know that our Black institutions, our HBCUs, know a little something about Carter G. Woodson, know a little something about Harriet Tubman, and we should have a role in the development and design of these projects in these special places. And also, when it comes to social justice issues, social science issues, there are huge projects around how we talk about these spaces, how we talk about these things and what we do in these spaces. And our HBCUs need to play a greater role in that. And last but not least, historic preservation. Our institutions, as well as our students, need to be much more involved in historic preservation. When we talk about climate change, think about the segregated Negro burial grounds throughout the South, where we weren't allowed to be buried in the public cemeteries. We typically were in the lowland areas as susceptible to flooding. And now with climate change, our ancestors, their bodies may be washing away. There's a need to preserve these places, if not for our ancestors, but also for our history. But we've got to get involved. We've got to take some activism in that. And through working with our HBCUs, which many of them are in the southern states, we should be forming coalitions to figure out how we save these places, as well as other things that are really important to who we are as a people, because we were here from the beginning, from the founding of this country, and no one should ever dispute our place in history and our influence on creating the culture that we have today. So I'll stop there. And Kim, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and Holly and Jackie, just being in your presence. There's some amazing ladies here that I just work with every day. But again, the Department of Interior is a great place to work.
Indeed, it is. And I love the call tag in our backdrop. It says at DOI, there is a space and place for you. And we really do mean that, especially when it comes to our HBCU students and HBCU institutions. We want to partner with you. We want to engage with you. We want you to come join the department. And so, and one last thing, George and Holly and Jackie called out all of the awesome career opportunities that we have at the department. I would like to invite you to visit our public-facing website to potentially explore a career or other internship opportunities at the department. The web address is careers.doi.gov. We encourage you and invite you to explore a career path with us. And with that being said, we are out of time now. We will all stick around to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you again for this opportunity to bring this session to you, the importance of preserving our natural and cultural resources for this and future generations. Take care and be blessed.